let's set up public key authentication for our server. So with this, we're going to log in using the key pair. We're going to generate an SSH key, and we're going to add the public key onto the server, and then the private key is going to remain on our computer, and we're going to use that to log into our server. I'm on Windows, and therefore I'm going to be using git bash as I've been doing with the rest of this setup. If you're on a Mac or Linux, don't worry, you can follow along with me. The steps are the same. Let's get started. So if you want to get to this post, as I've told you, just go to bizenosa.com/ubuntu22. That's going to redirect you to this page, bizenosa.com/ubuntu22. Click on SSH key and we can get started. So install, if you don't have Git already installed, just install Git, open git bash. Now that we've confirmed that we can log in with the new user and the new user has the permissions for sudo, what we can do is we can close the root user screen. We don't need to do anything with the root user anymore. We just needed to log in and create the new user. So after this, we're going to disable the root user from logging in, and we're also going to disable password authentication so that people can only log in using the key that we set up. So since I'm on Windows, the first thing I want to do is I want to create a folder. Now, this method of creating SSH keys is very good. It's a very nice one because you'll find that you'll not override your keys. Okay, this is very important. Sometimes you have multiple servers, and if you do it the way most people show you online, you're going to override your keys and you'll lose access to those servers forever. I need to make a directory. If you're on Linux, making a directory is really not that difficult. You can just go to your git bash and then you can make a directory. Let's create a folder. So on Windows, just go to your home directory. So your home directory, that's where your home directory is. If you don't know how to get there, you can also get here by going to your C drive, users, and then your name. So it's the same. After installing git bash, you'll have a folder here called .ssh, and inside of this, you can set up the different SSH. You can create a folder where you can save your SSH keys. So I can just create a new one, or I can create one within another. So this is a really nice way because you can group different keys for different servers. In this case, tutorials. I will go inside of the tutorials folder and I want to create a new folder, and I will call this Ubuntu 2204. Like that. Once I do that, I want to copy the path. I want to copy this path. Copy. I will put it here. So let me have this because there are certain things I don't want to be editing anything on git bash because it will take a lot of time. This entire thing, whether you're on Windows or on a Mac, as long as you're using git bash on Windows, this entire path can be replaced by a tilde. So even on Mac or on Windows, on Linux, the tilde is just a path, a shortcut for your home directory. That will be our new path. This is where we are going to store the keys. So let's come back here and follow along. So we've created the folder where we are going to store the keys. You can see here, I stored it inside here, but you can store it inside of another folder like I've done. The way to generate the keys, you'll use SSH keygen. This is the command that is going to generate your keys. And then -t, this is going to be the specific type of your key. In this case, I'm creating an RSA key and I want it to be 4096 bytes. Okay, so 4096 is more secure than anything below it. So make sure if you're using an RSA key, make sure it is a 4096 bit key that you create. And then -f, this is going to be the folder directory, or rather the file name for where we're going to store it. Okay, so the only thing I need from this is that. So once I copy this, SSH keygen is going to generate our keys and it's going to store it inside of this directory that I've just created. So at this point, let me just paste it on a new line. I will paste it there. Let me increase the font size. So I'm going to do SSH keygen -f folder name. So remember that this is a folder name. I'm going to need to give the keys a name. So I'm going to call it, I can call it anything I want. Let me just call mine ubu22 keys. This will be the name of my private key and the public key. Once we generate them, you'll see 2 keys with that name inside of this folder. Just remember, you're doing this on your local computer. So these keys will be generated and they will be stored on your local machine. So when you open Git Bash, just open Git Bash and ensure you're not logged in on your server. This you're doing on your local computer. If you're logged in to your server, you can just do exit. So if I'm logged in, I can just do exit. And that's going to log me out. And then you can continue. So I'm going to paste in that. Paste. SSH keygen that, all that. Everything is as it should be. And then I'm going to press enter. And this is also important. You need to add a passphrase to your key. This way, if somebody comes to your computer and they take your key and they go and they try to log in with your key, then they will need the passphrase. So the passphrase is a second security for your key. Make sure you create one and make sure it is one that you can remember. As a matter of fact, just save it somewhere, write it somewhere, because don't trust your memory all the time. You will forget these keys. Make sure you write it down first, and then that's when you type it on your screen so that you won't forget it and you'll know it is the same key. So I've added a key to mine. Even though I'm not going to use this server for anything, I've added a key to mine. I've added a passphrase to my key. Permission failed. So let's see what happened. SSH Tutorial Ubuntu 22 keys failed. Permission denied. Okay, so I can see the issue here is probably the asterisks. The slashes you see on Windows. On Windows, the slashes are like that. That was my mistake. But on Linux, you can see this is how they're supposed to be. So that is just a mistake that I have made due to me working on Windows. You just need to know that on Windows, this needs to be a /. This is a / because the bash, on bash, this is like escaping something. So it was just escaping a space. So that is a very stupid mistake, but you're probably going to make it. So the problem is just this. As soon as I copy this, we can try again. Copy, and then I will come back here, there, and then I will do Control L to clear the screen. So I will paste. Everything is okay. Enter. And then I will enter the passphrase once again. So just remember that when you're working with Git Bash, it is like you're working on the Linux environment. So the Linux shell is now accessible to you, and the Linux shell does not recognize the /. The / on Linux is escaping, okay? So it's just like in programming, when you're escaping things, use the /. The /, this is the one for paths. This is the one for paths on Linux. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to come into the folder to show you that your keys are now generated. Now this is a public key. It has the .pub, and this is a private key. This is the one we're going to upload into the server. So whether you're on Linux or Mac or Windows, you'll find these keys now on your computer. If you go to the directory where you save them inside of the .ssh, inside of the .ssh file folder, you're going to find them. But just remember, just note that your keys are there. You can find your keys there, okay? So I'm going to Control L to clear the screen. And then we can continue. The next step is to upload the keys onto your server. Okay, so if you do experience a problem whereby this doesn't work for you, you can actually add these keys manually onto your server. I don't know whether I have that here. When we get there, I'll look at it. But let's just do SSH copy ID. Now, SSH copy ID is going to upload a key with this identity, and it uploads the public key, and then that will be the user and your IP address. So I'm just going to copy this entire thing because I'm going to replace it on Notepad. The path to our key, that is a path to our key. But just remember that when you're uploading to your server, you need to upload the public key. key. So that is a public key that is called .pub. Let me just copy my IP and save it here because I will use it a lot. Control V, and this, I will copy this, and let me just save it somewhere up there. So if I copy this, this will add our key. SSH copy ID will add the public key. Okay, so the key you're adding is a public key, and you're adding it for this user. So if you want to add the key for a different user, you'll need to do the same thing for the different user that you're adding the key to. So you can use the same key for multiple users. If you're paranoid, create different keys. So I will come back. Still, this is on the local computer. Make sure you're not logged into your server when you're doing this. So on my local PC, I'll just paste that in. Enter. It's going to ask me to log into my server. And once I log in successfully, it will add the key. So it's asking me for the password for this user. For this user, I'll enter the password. Now you can see number of keys added, 1. Now try logging into the machine. So we're going to see how to log in into our server. So if you do experience an error with SSH copy ID, probably you're on a Mac. Sometimes on a Mac, you won't be able to use SSH copy ID unless you install Homebrew. So if you install Homebrew and you install SSH copy ID, you can Google how to install that. But if you don't want to go through that process, what you can do is you can go to log into your server, and then on your server, make a directory called .ssh, and then create a file called sudo nano ssh keys. So this one line is going to create a folder called .ssh, and it's also going to create a file called authorized keys. Now, instead of this authorized keys, all you have to do is come into, and you can see I'm opening it with Nano. Make sure you open it with Nano, because I noticed that when you open it with Vim, Vim doesn't put everything in one line as it should. So what you'll do if you experience an error, just bear with me. If everything worked well for you, you'll come in here into .pub, and then you can open it with Visual Studio Code. And when you open this with Visual Studio Code, you can see it's just one line. Control A, Control, copy everything, and then go into your server. This is just an example that I'm doing, but on my local computer, I can do, I don't know, the Nano is installed, and if it is not installed, too bad. But let me just create Nano. Let me just try Nano. You can see Nano is installed. It comes with Git bash. That is good news. Now, all you have to do is on the first line there, just paste in the key like that. It needs to be on one line, just like it is. And then you save. And to save on Nano, you'll do Control X and then Y to accept the changes. Okay, you can see permission denied. But anyway, you see what you need to do. This is what you need to do, okay? You just need to paste in the file and save it. If you message me and tell me that your SSH copy ID didn't work, this is what I'm going to tell you to do anyway. Once you copy the key and you save it successfully, make sure you come down and you change the permissions. And most importantly, after changing the permissions, make sure you also do this with the new user. And the reason for doing this is because if you don't do this, your user will not be able to log in with those keys. Let's go and see how we can log into our server. So just in brief, to log into your server, you need to SSH into your server using the user IP, user plus the IP address, and then with the identity of the key. So for this, you're going to use the private key. Where was it saved? You're going to add the link to your private key here. Copy. Come in here. Control V. Now SSH username IP. So I will replace that with this. Thank God we copied that. We copied it and saved it there. Paste. And then the identity of the key. Identity of the key, we're just going to copy it up to that point. We don't use the .pub. .pub is the public key, and we don't need to use the public key here. We're using the private key. And if you had changed, and when we get there, we'll see this, but if you change the port, you also need to specify the port. So maybe you are logging in with port. Maybe that's your new port. Once we change the port, you'll need to add the port as well. But in this case, we have not changed the port yet. We're going to see how we can change our SSH port. For now, let's just copy this so that we can log into our server. I will clear the screen, Control L, paste, enter. You see that it's asking me for the passphrase. So I'll just enter the passphrase that I set. There we go. You're now logged into your server. At this point, you can disable the root user from logging in via SSH. You can also disable password authentication. So I'm just going to do Control L to clear the screen so that we can do those last two steps. Disable root user from logging in. So we'll just, for this I'm using Vim. If you don't know how to use Vim, I do have a Vim tutorial here. There's also a video for it. You can watch the video to learn how to use Vim. So I will come here. I will open the SSH configuration file. So if I come back into my server where I'm logged into the server, paste in that, I need to enter the password for my sudo user. We want to edit two things. We want to change permit root login to no. If I want to search for this, if you come here under Vim, you can see all this search. You can do / plus the string you want to search. And then you can use N, capital N or small n. So capital N is basically just Shift N to navigate up and down, and then press I to edit. We will search for permit root login. I'm already on the normal mode. So you want to go into normal mode. I'll just press escape to ensure that I'm in normal mode. And then once you're in normal mode, after pressing escape, make sure that you press / and then I will paste in the string that I want to search. Paste, and you can see it has found permit root login. So if I press enter, it's going to search for that. So I can go up and down using N. So I'm just pressing the small n, and you'll see that it can find permit root login. Yes, so it has found the permit root login that was added by Valtra. You can see there was one which was up there and it was commented out. So they've added this to allow root login. I don't think there's any other. Let me press N again. So if I press N, it goes to the first one. So just press N until you get to permit root login, the one that we want. Okay, so you can see we have permit root login down here. If I want to go to the end, enter the $. When I press the $, it takes me to the last character of this. So I'll just delete it. So I'm just pressing delete. If I want to undo anything I've done, I'll just press U. And when I press U, it's going to undo those changes that I've made. So let me press I to go into insert mode. If you're not in insert mode, you won't be able to enter anything. So you can see down there, it tells me it's in insert mode. I can just delete normally using the delete keys, and then I'll enter NO for no. And now if I want to exit Vim, I can do Shift ZZ, that is going to save, or I can do Shift ZQ, and that's going to omit any changes that I've made, and it's just going to close the file without saving anything. Or you can also do the :WQ, but I'm used to Shift ZQ, Shift ZZ. So if I come back here, what else did we need to change on this file? We've already changed permit root login to no, so root user will not be able to log in. The next thing that we need to change before we end the video will be password authentication. Now, before I save, let me do escape. We'll press escape so that I can go back to normal mode because I want to search again. So to search, I'll just do / and then I will paste using Shift Insert, and I will press enter. And then I can go up, and if I press N, it's going to show me all the occurrences for password authentication. So there it is. It was just there. I don't know why I didn't notice it. So password authentication, you can see there's a password authentication here, which is yes, but this one is commented out. So let's just go and edit the one that was already edited down here. So this one was probably added because you didn't use your SSH keys. You did not set an SSH key when you're deploying your Ubuntu server. So I'm going to press I to go into insert mode. I. So if you don't want to, if you are finding this a bit tedious, what you can do is you can just use nano. Wherever there is VI, use nano. This will be no. Password authentication, no. Permit root login, no. So I'm going to do Shift ZZ to save. Or if you want to save, you can also do :WQ. Okay, so this will be saving and quitting. If you don't want to save, you can do :Q exclamation mark. So I want to do Shift ZZ to save and quit. Before I even do that, I need to go to escape mode. So I'm just going to press escape on my keyboard. And then I will do Shift Z to save and exit. All right, so the next thing, we need to reload SSH. You need to reload SSH. Password authentication has been saved. We need to do sudo service SSH restart. To restart it, if you're Debian Ubuntu, use that. So now, if we try to log in as root, we should experience an error. Let me come and copy. Let me just copy the whole thing because I'm going to use it at some point. So if I come here, let's paste that in. I want to try to log in with root, so I'll do SSH. Enter. So this will refuse. We cannot log in via SSH using the root user. Now let's try to log in with a password without telling the system the location of our key. SSH. Paste. So this will assume that we want to log in with the key. So normally, if you don't disable password authentication, this will be able to, you'd be able to work with this even if you have an SSH key. But in this case, it won't work because we've disabled password authentication. So if I press enter, you can see permission denied. You cannot log in without the key. If you want to log in, you need to tell the system explicitly where your key is. So we're going to copy that. And we're going to try to log in. Enter the passphrase. And there you go, you're logged in. All right, that pretty much covers how to set up SSH key authentication on Ubuntu 22.04. I've tried this on Debian 11 and Debian 10, and it works. So you can follow along with Debian 10, Debian 11, and everything is going to work smoothly. What is the next step in our server setup? The next step is Ubuntu firewall setup. So I'm just going to brush up on this because normally, if you're going to install a control panel, setting up the firewall will probably be done by your control panel. If you're installing HestiaCP, then you can just leave that to HestiaCP. But it's important to install UFW because it will make your work very easy in setting up your firewall. Let's do that next.